This is the HP 15S, and if infomercials are to be believed, this is America's favorite laptop from America's favorite laptop manufacturer. Lol. This model includes an AMD Ryzen 5500U, 8GB of RAM, and half a terabyte of SSD storage. Anyway, more on all that later. This is a very typical clamshell laptop design with a drop hinge, ports around the sides, and conventional keyboard and trackpad arrangement. In this generic silver, it's not particularly exciting to look at, but you could argue that that's a good thing. An unusual but greatly appreciated design feature is upward firing speakers, although this does come at the expense of kicking the keyboard a little too far forward and squashing the trackpad as a result. The underside of the laptop is very well designed with wide rubber feet and absolutely nothing that can dig annoyingly into your lap. Happy days. Dimensions are decently compact, measuring in pretty much right on average for a 15-inch class machine, and it's pretty lightweight as well, with the tiny power brick barely adding anything to the total weight. Included in the mostly recyclable packaging is the laptop itself, a tiny 45-watt power brick, and a fancy sealed envelope adding a few moments of wholly unnecessary pomp and circumstance to the underwhelming reveal of a small setup guide and warranty information. When new, this laptop arrived with a non-functional webcam and sharp little molding lines on various edges all around the casing. Dead giveaways of the sort of build quality we're dealing with here. Connectivity is just about standard for this class of laptop, although thankfully this one is not infected with any USB 2.0 ports. Unfortunately, HDMI is still 1.4B, so it can't do 4K at 60Hz. The USB Type-A ports are both mounted to a replaceable daughterboard, so if these broke or wore out, they'd be easy enough to replace. The same goes for the audio mini jack and SD card reader, and even the DC in jack is modular. I do like serviceability, so bonus points for HP here. The all-plastic ClickPad style trackpad is completely fine to use. It tracks fine, the click is fine, and the lack of any rattling or other anomalies is fine too. There's a full-size keyboard sitting above that trackpad. It exists, it has a number pad, and it looks nice. With the positives out of the way, this thing is absolutely horrible to type on. The long travel is wasted on scissor mechanisms that are disconcertingly unstable, there's no backlight, and the key markings are completely invisible in some lighting conditions. It rattles like an absolute bastard doing normal use too, and the rattliness varies depending on where you're pressing the keys. While there is a deliciously shiny metal backplate reinforcing the keyboard deck, the whole assembly is only held in by small, sparse plastic welds in a way that leaves it feeling loose and, well, rattly. Special shout out though to the factory employee or angry robot who decided to take out years of frustration on this plastic sheet. The palm rest is backed by plastic with some efforts made from the top and bottom to reinforce the area with complex moldings dotting the two plastic assemblies. These do nothing. This laptop is insanely, comically squishy. It's like a big silver marshmallow. Display hinges are wound tight enough that it's not possible to open the lid one-handed, requiring 875 grams or 8.58 newtons of force to lift from fully closed. The display then requires 380 grams or 3.7 newtons to move from a 90-degree angle, but it's very floppy when it's open, which points to at least one structural deficiency somewhere. Predictable? Yes. Disappointing anyway? Yes. Having a look from inside, the brackets in the base unit only distribute the load over a relatively small area, and given how thin and floppy the keyboard deck is, this is not reassuring. Inside the lid, there's actually what kind of looks to be a competent setup. Fairly wide hinges bolt into the bottom of the lid, and long L-shaped metal brackets reach up from there beside the LCD panel and screw into the top of the lid to help spread the load out vertically. But despite HP's efforts to beef things up a little, the incredibly soft materials, use of only 3 screws per side, and loose tolerances all over the place still conspire against a potentially decent design here, and this area looks to be the primary source of that display wobble. It's worth noting that that LCD is bonded to the plastic lid with double-sided tape and not the friendly pull tab variety, so you would almost certainly damage the display if you ever needed to replace the lid. Speaking of that display, aside from the barely acceptable 1080p resolution, it's an absolute shit show. Things like contrast ratios, the basic sRGB color gamut, or even just acceptable brightness are concepts yet to be introduced to this display, and being the worst sort of TN LCD panel, viewing angles are so bad that your eyes constantly feel like they're out of phase with each other. It's hard to adequately convey how bad this sort of screen is on camera, but I'm going to assume everybody's encountered one of these before and understands the pain of using it. This is not acceptable at any price, and HP should be ashamed of themselves for fitting this garbage to a more than $700 laptop. They won't though, and they'll probably do it again. Mounted above the display is the usual webcam and stereo microphones. HP doesn't think you deserve a privacy shutter, but since this webcam doesn't work anyway, we'll just assume that it's crap and move on. The The sound system installed in this machine is a usual 2-channel, 2-speaker setup, and saints be praised, HP's had the good sense to mount the speakers facing upwards towards you, just under the display. Lovely. Speaker drivers themselves are nice looking little units with 15mm mylar cones and rolled rubber surrounds mounted in reasonably large enclosures. Responsible for driving these is a Realtek ALC3247 chip, which seems to be predominantly used in HP systems. I was unable to find a datasheet for this one, so rated power output for the headphone and internal speaker amplifiers are anyone's guess, but subjectively, while the audio system has very decent sound quality, the output volume is a little weak through both the internal speakers and the headphone jack. So not bad, not great. The socketed Wi-Fi chip is a pretty crappy Azure Wave dual band unit which only supports the old Wi-Fi AC standard and Bluetooth 5.0. Included storage is an HP-specific Phison 1/2TB PCIe 4 SSD, despite the fact that this laptop only supports PCIe 3. This unit uses a Phison PS5019-E19 controller with no DRAM cache and 2 Toshiba TLC NAND flash chips. Peak read and write speeds are pretty much maxing out that PCIe 3 bus the drive is connected to, so that's something. There's no slot for a second SSD and no cold plate or thermal pad applied to the included drive to assist with heat transfer. Now, HP have sensibly decided to integrate power profiles with Windows, so you might be wondering what exactly this My HP software does once you've managed to tell it to bugger off enough times on the way in. The answer is absolutely nothing. The crapware loadout on this machine is insane. None of it is useful, and quite frankly, if this were my main computer, I'd be nuking that SSD and starting from scratch. I felt like I was constantly being nagged to buy something while using this laptop that I'd already paid for, and that's completely unacceptable, but coming from the company that wants to force everybody to subscribe to a printer, it's nothing new. Power draw on the 15S is very low. At idle, in balanced mode while plugged in, as measured from the power outlet, the machine is drawing around 7.5 watts, and when running flat out with the CPU fully loaded up, this increases to around 31. The 41 watt-hour battery fitted to this unit is still reporting 41 watt-hours of capacity after calibrating over a few charge cycles. That will gradually drop with use, but it's off to a good start. With the display set to its very low maximum brightness and sitting idle on the Windows desktop, the 15S managed an underwhelming 6 hours 53 minutes of runtime. And during my usual heavy internet usage test, which is wildly unscientific, it quit after 4 hours and 50 minutes. Dismal. Charging from empty, the battery takes 37 minutes to hit 50%, 1 hour to hit 80%, and it's full after just over 2 hours. When it finally wears out, that battery is a bit of a bitch to get to, as the 15S hides 6 screws under the rubber feet on the base plate, which is also held on by a large number of very aggressive clips. After that, the battery is held in by 6 screws and uses a very nice fixed socket instead of a ribbon cable to connect to the motherboard. The good-looking little processor forever trapped inside this thing is the misleadingly named Ryzen 5 5500U. I was caught off guard by that name while buying this one and assumed it was a Ryzen 5000 series chip, which would mean Zen 3 architecture. Nope, that's a lie. So thanks very much for that, AMD. In reality, this is an up-branded Zen 2 based Ryzen 5 4600U, and thankfully that's not really the end of the world. This is a 6-core 12-thread part built on TSMC's 7nm process and should be extremely power efficient. The densely packed little VRM arrangement providing power to this chip looks to be a 2+1 phase setup, which suggests a very low wattage. And the integrated GPU here is a Radeon RX Vega 7 with 448 shaders running at a maximum of 1.8 GHz. These Vega iGPUs are starting to show their age now, but despite only limited support for modern APIs, it's still definitely a highlight of this chip. RAM supplied with this unit is boring old DDR4 3200, in this case a single 8GB SODIMM provided by everybody's favorite brand Ramaxle using Samsung memory modules. This RAM is fully socketed with one free slot enabling you to double it to 16GB and enable dual channel mode. Hallelujah. The system tasked with extracting heat from the SoC is a tiny little single heat pipe setup with a very small fin arrangement, weighing in at only 26 grams without the fan. Less weight means less thermal mass to absorb heat spikes, so this system heavily relies on the fan to dissipate heat even in short workloads. The copper heat spreader has a reasonably smooth finish and is held down with 4 screws for good pressure distribution, but there's no contact for VRM components. Providing airflow is one tiny little fan built by Delta Electronics. Airflow intake is provided both through vents in the bottom case and from above through the keyboard via a surprisingly nicely finished secondary vent. When it does kick up, that fan is reasonably quiet, so while it's constantly there, it's at least not too distracting. Now, laptops in this class are probably not intended for heavy workloads or gaming, but that doesn't mean we can't be a bit mean to it to see what happens. Kicking things off, I've subjected it to a 30-minute stress test running Cinebench R23 on a loop while the laptop sits flat on a desk in its highest performance mode. Since there's no separate GPU, I haven't run a GPU test at the same time, so 100% of the power budget will be aimed at the processor cores. CPU package power starts off boosting to a promising 25 watts, but rapidly deflates to 15, which is the lowest sustained power level I've ever seen in a laptop this big. Core temperatures are unsurprisingly kept well under control despite the barely there cooling system. After a brief spike up to a low 80 degrees, it settles at just over 60 for the rest of the run. Of course, there's no such thing as a free lunch, and the price for the low power and low temperatures is core frequency. The CPU can only hang on to 2.5 GHz even with just the CPU cores themselves fired up, which will drop further if the GPU's loaded at the same time since they dynamically share the same power budget. Given that we're dealing with an extremely low power SoC, you'd probably expect VRM temperatures to remain low, and you'd be right. All of the components stay in the low 50s even after a sustained load. Likewise, as you'd expect, exterior temperatures are kept right under control with generally negligible temperature increases on both the top and bottom. Now, of course, none of this is impressive since a Steam Deck can dissipate 15 watts like it's nothing, and there are no bonus points just for avoiding failure. Interestingly, that aging 6-core Ryzen 5 is capable of outperforming Intel's 8-core i3 N305 while using 3 to 5 watts less power. Now that's certainly something, but it still only positions this chip somewhere around half to a third the current state-of-the-art in low-power CPUs. In fact, it even gets completely smoked in the usual canned benchmarks by Apple's now 4-year-old M1 fitted to a MacBook Air that doesn't even have a fan. Nevertheless, in normal use, this system feels surprisingly snappy and responsive, showing absolutely none of the off-putting lagginess of the i3 N305. If most of the other parts didn't suck, it probably wouldn't be a bad little web browsing machine, but I'd rather stick a fork in my eye than spend any time reading or watching videos on this thing. The integrated Radeon Vega GPU definitely suggests that this machine could handle some gaming, if you actually wanted to, but the actual performance varies enormously depending on RAM configuration. AMD's little old Vega integrated GPUs really do punch above their weight when they're given enough memory bandwidth, so while modern benchmarks still look like slideshows, there's actually a little bit of gaming performance here, with Dying Light almost managing to hit 60 FPS with the second chip installed. Still, don't. Yuck. So then, what do I think of this as an overall system? Straight to the point this time. While upgradability and serviceability are acceptable, the HP 15S skimps so severely on two of the most fundamentally important parts, display and keyboard, that using it is an insult to your senses, and hard corners and jagged edges around the palm rest attempt to slice into you during use. Since this laptop has hurt my eyes, skin and feelings, and quality control didn't even extend to checking if the webcam worked at the factory, I'm rating this one the maximum of 5 sad laptops and giving it the inaugural Nuclear Notebook Certified Complete Crap Award. Congratulations.